Great. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back from lunch. I know we know after lunch, and as we get later in the day, we need to keep our conversations engaging and impactful. And our next participants are not going to disappoint. They're known for bringing both engagement and impact to any conversation about our changing climate and the effects it has on communities. California has long been a leader in climate action and holding ourselves accountable to not only reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but also in preparing for and adapting to climate impacts. And California's long history of climate commitment and leadership has never wavered, even in the face of political shifts. I can think of no better leaders to embody this commitment than our next three panelists, who will explore California's enduring legacy in addressing climate change, the challenges we face, and the innovative strides we are making to overcome them. California Air Resources Board Chair Leanne Randolph helps lead efforts to mitigate the impacts of climate change, not just for our state, but globally. Her leadership has pioneered many of the approaches now used worldwide to address air quality problems and to protect people from the harmful effects of air pollution. California Natural Resources Agency Secretary Wade Crowfoot helps build a climate-resilient California by overseeing and supporting more than 26 distinct departments, conservancies, and commissions, which lead efforts to steward California's natural environment and advance Governor Newsom's key priorities on the conservation of California's abundant natural resources and species. Last, but certainly not least, Governor Gavin Newsom, a person who not only is the champion of California's global leadership when it comes to addressing climate change, but the person who holds us all accountable to ensuring not only California, but the world can benefit from the decisions we make here in California today. Thank you, Governor, Leanne, and Wade, for being here and sharing your insights and leadership in the climate space. I'll now pass it to Wade to kick off the discussion. Wade?
Well, thanks so much, Sam. I know we're all thrilled, Governor, to have you join us. As you know, there are several hundred people joining us today. This is the first regional summit coming out of the global summit that Pope Francis convened at the Vatican last May. Yep. And just interested in your perspectives coming out of that summit into this regional summit.
Well, I appreciate it, and thank you everybody virtually joining in, and thank you, Sam, for the introduction and your complimentary words to both Leanne and Wade. I want to pick up, if I can, Wade, just a little bit on what Sam teed up, and just as a reminder to some that may be familiar with California, those that have no familiarity with California and our desire to maintain our leadership in the low carbon green growth space. It goes back, in contemporary terms, it goes back quite literally the year of my birth, 1967, where then Governor Ronald Reagan, before his presidency, as governor, established the Air Resources Board, which Leanne chairs. The California Air Resources Board was advanced not only by his administration, but by subsequent administrations, both within the state of California, but also with the federal government. In fact, in 1970, then President Richard Nixon codified California's leadership with the establishment under the Clean Air Act of the ability for California to lead with environmental waivers that allowed us to be the pace car in many respects for these efforts to change the way we produce and consume energy, to address at the time one of the most vexing issues that this state faced, and that was the issue of air pollution, particularly the issue of smog in the Southern California LA basin. And I say that to make this point and to contextualize, I think, a point that is often lost in the environmental debate. It was a bipartisan endeavor. It wasn't political. And so in the spirit that we are united, and that's a spirit of commonality, this recognition that we're all better off, in the spirit of the Bible itself that teaches us we're many parts, but one body. And when one part suffers, we all suffer. This notion of our interdependence has been the frame to which we've advanced over the course of decades. A lot of nation and world leading efforts to clean our environment, to protect our biodiversity, and to maintain our leadership. It is not lost on me from an American prism that this is a challenging time for leadership in the climate space. But what Sam said I thought was important, and it's a point I want to emphasize as we get into a Q&A with these two leaders. I want everyone to know this: we are a stable partner. Administrations in Washington, D.C., as an example, come and go. We have a new administration that's an old administration. The Trump administration pulled us out of the Paris Accords. We were brought back in with the Biden administration. Now we're being pulled back out. That's changed, certainly. But there's one constant, and that's California. The fifth largest economy in the world, $3.86 trillion a year economy, a state, subnational state, that's larger than 21 state populations in America combined. I make that point that the size and scale and scope, the resources and resourcefulness that is well established in this state should give you comfort that we are a long-term partner, a sustainable partner, not a situational partner. And we are absolutely fully committed. We were a year ago, we were there together in Vatican City. There was some open-ended questions about what may or may not happen in American politics. Well, from an environmental prism, it was not the best outcome. And so we have to step up our game. That's why we're honored to be back with all of you to fulfill the promises that we promoted a year ago and to continue to share ideas, not just idealism, to share pragmatism, to share our approach, particularly our approach to dealing with uncertainty and to deal with the realities that only have become more and more acute. And I'll close on that before I ask Leanne some questions. We just came out of one of the most extreme events, one of the most significant natural disasters in American history in Los Angeles. 100-mile-an-hour winds with fire attached. We had the most devastating wildfire in our state's history. We lost over 24 lives, communities in Southern California torn asunder. It is a familiar scene, tragically, here in the state of California. We had the deadliest wildfire in California history a few years back, 6 years ago, the Camp Fire in Paradise, California. The hots, I say often, are getting hotter, the dries are getting drier, and unsurprisingly, with these atmospheric rivers, these rain bombs, these Pineapple Express, however one wants to describe them, these weather systems where you're getting a month of rain in quite literally hours or days. The wets are getting a lot wetter. It requires us to do things radically different. And so, Leanne, the question I want to ask you and pose to you as well, Wade, and to socialize with all of you, I think we're at a point where we've all acknowledged the problem. We know what, we know why we're doing what, but it's the how. And we're in the how business in California. And we want to implement at scale. And what I refer to this moment, perhaps best way to refer to it, is the great implementation to make real all of our promotion and promises. We have audacious goal setting. It's not about goal setting anymore. We don't talk about goals anymore. It's about achieving those goals. And so, Leanne, you're the practitioner. You're the one that drives regulation, policy. You influence markets around the globe, not just around the rest of the country. How are we doing on our implementation? How is the state of California positioned to actually achieve some of these audacious goals?
Well, you know, as you discussed, California has been a leader in the environmental space for decades. And when California originally adopted the first landmark climate change law, AB 32, it really changed the game in terms of how to think about climate change and tackling climate change. Instead of saying, oh, we're going to do one policy here, one policy there, instead, it directed the Air Resources Board to think about an economy-wide strategy to think about how we can transition our energy sector, how we transition our vehicle sector, how we transition the rest of our industrial sector. And so it required the board to adopt what we call the climate change scoping plan. And it requires us to update that scoping plan every 5 years.
And just for language we can all understand, the scoping plan is nothing more than the actual plan to implement these strategies.
Absolutely. It is the analytical work that tells us how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and it gives us the strategies. It says, here are market-based solutions that we can deploy, like our cap and trade program or our low carbon fuel standard. Here are the vehicle standards we can deploy. Transportation represents the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in California, if you include all the way from extraction to the tailpipe. And so we have strategies.
And by the way, over 50%. When you include both in the state of California, just to put that in perspective. Yeah. That's not the case across many other jurisdictions, but in California, quite literally the majority of the challenge.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we look at agriculture, we look at methane emissions. How can we reduce methane emissions in the industrial sector, in the agricultural sector? How can we reduce black carbon? How can we reduce all of these pollutants that really impact climate change and that are causing the devastation that you just described?
And this is a plan that you publish, you put out, and you update on a consistent basis. What, every 5 years?
Every
this
5
is formally
years.
Updated?
Yes.
And it's scrutinized, it's market tested, it's shared, and it's about as transparent a process and planning that exists anywhere out there, correct?
Absolutely. A lot of analytical work goes into it, and importantly, a lot of stakeholder engagement goes into it. Working with communities, with industries, with manufacturers, trying to understand sort of what are the technologies we can bring to bear, what are the new things that we can create, what are the old things we can do differently. And this year, for the first time, and it would be great if Wade could talk a little bit about this as well, the last time we did the scoping plan in 2022, we included a natural and working lands chapter for the first time. Yep. So we analyzed how our natural and working lands can sequester carbon, so how we can keep those lands from producing more carbon, but also how we can use those lands to sequester carbon. And that was really groundbreaking work that California did.
And Wade, to that point, I mean, you've also been the national leader, and the Biden administration advanced this, but California led with this 30 by 30 initiative as well. We so often talk about greenhouse gas emissions. We talk about emissions. We don't talk about biodiversity. We don't talk about land and water as much as perhaps we should. And that's a big shift that you've particularly more intentionally been focused on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a big point of progress over the last 5 years in California and around the world. So much of the focus for the last couple of decades when we talk about climate change is reducing pollution, critically important. Buildings, transportation, production, and industry. That's all important. But what we've realized and what our scientists around the world have reminded us through the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is our natural systems are really important to the carbon cycle. We all learned this in 5th grade. Our trees take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen. And when it works well. The challenge is, of course, as we've increased pollution, we've reduced that natural carbon cycle through deforestation, through places in California like catastrophic wildfire. So we need to focus on helping our lands be that sink to remove and store carbon that they need to be, rather than that source of emissions. And it's remarkable. Globally, scientists figure that almost a third of the near-term impactful actions that can be taken to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and achieve carbon neutrality globally are nature-based solutions. And so we're leading the way in California. You put out the executive order for 30 by 30 to conserve 30% of our lands in coastal waters by 2030. A few months later, President Biden followed suit. And then actually about a year and a half later, every nation in the world, save the United States, actually entered into an agreement to protect 30% of the globe by 2030. Right. So we're really, I think the point of progress is we're not treating nature, biodiversity, conservation separately from climate change. It's really two sides of the same coin.
And so that's tidal restoration. We have a huge project out here in the Delta. This may be derivative, it may be adjacent to the actual specific numeric goal, but you also just finished the largest dam removal project in United States history,
Yeah.
and one of the largest river restoration projects in U.S. history.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a complicated point, but it's one that's often overlooked, which is all of our systems are connected. You know, our water systems are connected to our land systems, are connected to our carbon systems. So take, for example, Klamath Dam removal. It's happened on your watch. Largest river restoration project in American history. Remove 4 defunct dams. Critically important for the fisheries, which are important for tribes that have been leading this effort for decades, important for the fishing communities actually on the coast, but also important for water supply in that part of California. So we can do things with multiple benefits. You mentioned the largest tidal restoration project in California history happening pretty close to Sacramento in our Delta. Important for the environment, but also important for carbon sequestration. Our wetlands, our coastal wetlands and our delta wetlands, important sinks for climate. So the name of the game these days, given the height of the challenge, the severity of the challenge, is multiple benefit projects. So the work that we do and the investments we make benefit our wildfire safety, but also the water security in our watersheds, for example, and our natural environment. And we're excited. We're doing so much of that in California.
I think one of the things that we really want to stress, and I made the point not to impress anybody, but to impress upon you the size of the economy in California that continues to grow. We're the tentpole of the U.S. economy. Again, the size of this economy in a global perspective would make us the 5th largest nation in the world. And I say that again to make the point of the tyranny of or versus the genius of and, that we've been able to achieve that growth because we've invested in strategies to change the way we produce and consume energy. It's not, the old binary was you're going to sacrifice economic growth or you're going to be an environmental leader. We've been able to do both and I think that's foundational in terms of our understanding that really this is around economic prosperity. This is around economic growth. It's not just around environmental justice. It's not just about equity. You can have a prism in terms of a relationship to Mother Nature, but also the markets and free enterprise as it relates to creating the price signals, back to you, Leanne, and creating markets like we created for electric vehicles. There's a guy that you may have heard of by the name of Elon Musk. He's been in the news a little bit, maybe even in your home country. And he dabbled in a business many years ago, not that many years ago, in an electric vehicle business. Tesla happened here in California. And it happened here for a reason, because of the price signals and the regulation that helped create that market and all the wealth that has come from that. And Leanne, I think that's a really important part of the work that you do at the Air Resources Board, is to stress test these goals, but to do so with market-based strategies.
Right. I mean, we can adopt all the rules that we want, but unless industry is capable of achieving what we're trying to get them to achieve, it's not going to work. Yeah. So we really have to structure both our regulatory work and our market-based work in a way that it ensures the right flexibility. And when I have international conversations, I talk to a lot of countries about, the success of our vehicle regulatory structure and how that can be replicated. And that's one of the points that I make. You need to provide some flexibility, and you also need to provide the signal that if I can do this, if I'm a first mover, if I'm a company that's stepping up to do it first, then I am going to be successful. And so we do that in the regulatory space, but we also do it with our market programs. Our cap and trade program has a declining cap of emissions reductions that need to be achieved. And we don't tell the program participants how to do it. We tell them they need to do it, and they can find the most cost-effective way to accomplish it, and that incents the right technologies and the right solutions. In our scoping plan, we look at a whole suite of issues, and that includes new technologically advanced opportunities like direct carbon removal, mechanical carbon removal, like carbon capture, utilization, and storage, which are really critical as we are starting to get to the harder parts of decarbonization.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at our energy system, you know, many days of the year, we are producing upwards of 100% of our system being supported by renewable energy, but we still have to have some of these fossil-based sources of energy on the system that we use much less because we have deployed so much renewables and so much energy storage. But now we have an opportunity to capture the carbon that comes from that and sequester it or use it for beneficial purposes like making cement, which is impossible to make without emitting carbon. So this is the innovation that California is really supporting and trying to move forward.
Yeah, and in what I hope you heard from Leanne is an all of the above strategy here, and that I'm thinking about what she describes as sort of being big on what, small on how, is creating the flexibility. So those market signals in relationship to the regulatory framework are allowed sort of entrepreneurial flexibilities that are required to get the private sector motivated and engaged and to create the incentive structure for investment to come into the space. And so direct air capture, California has been a leader. I think we have the first project of its type in the US. We've been working, I know, strong opinions on hydrogen. But in the green hydrogen space, obviously the carbon capture space more broadly defined. But one of the things I think is important as well, there's humility in this space. You know, we talked about that scoping plan, Leanne did, these business plans. There was a scoping plan not that many years ago that didn't even include battery storage. We didn't even conceive of it. And Leanne made a comment around sort of that duck curve, the wind and solar, when it all goes out and everybody gets home, turns on their light, and we have those gaps. And we've been able to mine those gaps in pretty significant ways. We've now among the largest installed battery storage of any jurisdiction in the world. I think outside of China itself, the state of California has more installed megawatts than any other jurisdiction. Is that right?
And the other thing about our market programs, which I think is really important as we think about climate resiliency, is the revenue that is created from our cap and trade program can then support communities as they are dealing with tackling the issues of climate change. Upwards of 75% of the greenhouse gas reduction funds that we get are spent in disadvantaged communities in California. And that includes a suite of strategies, in, you know, things like transit, bike paths, strategies to help residents deal with extreme heat, as you mentioned earlier. So all of that, that sort of market, you know, the innovation that's happening in the market space also spins off revenue that we can really help the residents of California who are dealing directly with the impacts of climate change.
Wade, you know, there's a sense, and I'm going to stress test this notion, but there's a sense out there, particularly from an American political frame, this last election, climate didn't seem to be top of mind for folks, even though we had more extreme events than we've had in our lifetime in terms of large scale, absolutely devastating hurricanes in the eastern parts of the United States. Obviously, wildfires. I'll remind you, by the way, the wildfires we had in California occurred in the middle of the winter in January. And we had conditions, drought conditions. There wasn't a drop of rain for 9 months in the areas that were impacted by these wildfires. I was just down in LA yesterday. It was close to 80 degrees. It's, again, middle of winter. And I know a weather event is not, you know, is not climate change. And I want to, you know, we have to be careful as leaders in this space not to overhype anomalies. But these trend lines are pretty damn obvious. Yet there's a trend line of lack of public enthusiasm to advance the kind of political will to continue that leadership, certainly outside of California, certainly as it relates to what occurred nationally in our country. And I imagine for other parts of the world. Are you concerned about that? Are you seeing something differently? And how do you think we combat some of that sort of climate fatigue?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think we are on the front lines of climate change. We know this in California. You know, over the last 5 years, the driest period, the wettest period, the hottest period, the worst wildfires. And what's interesting is when you look around the world, governments with similar climates, as Mediterranean climates, have experienced the same thing. And other parts of the world are experiencing it in a very severe way differently. So I think one thing is to look up and out across the world. There is a strong, strong mandate across the world that both recognizes the impacts of climate change and is focused on doing something about it. We're a bit of an anomaly in this country where it's a political debate. And I think that's where California and our partners in Massachusetts who are present here today and other states play such an important role to show the rest of the world that there is work happening in the United States. I'd also remind us that half of the governors in the United States lead states that are driving on climate change. And it's something like 55% of the American economy, 60% of the American economy, 55% of the population. That's really important as well. And then when you look at the polling on whether people are experiencing these impacts and whether they connect the dots, actually it breaks down a little bit better than simply a partisan divide where more people are seeing this. I think we have to do a few things. One is we have to protect people from the clear and present danger here in California, and we're doing that. Climate adaptation used to be sort of a wonky planning exercise, and now it's actually getting out there and protecting people from these impacts. I think we have to continue to make the case that we are supporting people across the country doing the same thing, whether it's intensifying hurricanes in Florida or worsening flooding in Louisiana. And maybe in this political climate, we don't have to call it climate change with some of our colleagues in other parts of the country. I have a lot of success talking about extreme weather. And regardless of someone's ideology or political party, people will click to extreme weather. I think at the end of the day, elected leaders, need to protect their citizens, their residents. And that's what we're all about. That's what resilience, readiness is all about. So the more that we can put it in the health and safety frame, I think we have to.
Love that. If you don't believe in science, you got to believe your own eyes, I guess what you're ultimately saying. And it's not, again, through a lens of red and blue in an American vernacular. It's the spirit of what a nation should be, red, white, and blue. This, again, fundamental notion that we all love our kids and we all share some basic fundamental values in common, places, lifestyles, traditions that are being destroyed in real time because of the impacts of climate change being felt around the globe. We recognize our time is limited, and so I just want to get to a critical question that they're all tackling with. I imagine all of you are as well, particularly as we come out of a global pandemic and all of the disruptions around supply chains and the inflationary impacts that have aided and abetted, I think, a lot of our political swings left and right, and all the stresses as it relates to costs. In this space, the issue of costs is coming up, Leanne, more and more and more. People are more cost sensitive. The electric bills are going up, bills across the spectrum. And people are stress testing a lot of these policies, low carbon fuel standards, our cap and trade program, any new initiation around appliances or emission standards. All of those things are being looked at through the lens now, more and more, of cost. What are we doing about that?
Well, first of all, making sure that everything we're doing is the most cost-effective way to do it, I think, is the first thing, right? Making sure that we are allowing businesses to figure out the most cost-effective way to do what they need to do, deploying technology in a cost-effective way. That said, fundamentally, the cost of inaction cannot be ignored. And that is true both for climate change and for air quality. The asthma, the cancer, the health impacts of poor air quality have an economic impact as well. And the impacts of climate change that we're all dealing with, and the families that are suffering now in the Los Angeles area and thinking about how they're going to be able to rebuild. Those are costs too, and we have to be mindful of both.
No, I mean, pollution is an act of theft. period, full stop.
Yeah.
And we need to call that out. And we've been calling a lot of that out, perhaps a little more aggressively than most other jurisdictions as it relates to what climate change ultimately is. It's the burning of greenhouse gases, it's coal, natural gas, and oil, and calling out some of the folks that haven't been always been playing fair, haven't always been playing by the more traditional sets of rules, the rules that are established in the spirit, again, of the Church and the Vatican, and the literal, not figurative interpretation of the Bible, and the Ten Commandments, I may add. Wade, in closing.
Yeah, I would just say something you remind us is climate action is a long-term economic strategy. We know the world is moving to these new technologies. Other countries are, want to continue to grow their market share. California has been so successful growing our clean economy as part of our growth because of our leadership. And if we cede that leadership as the United States now, we ultimately reduce our economic prospects for actually dominating those industries. So I think it's critically important to limit costs to consumers now, but at the same time, understand the economic long view, which is our investment in these policies and these technologies is so good for our economy in the long run.
Well, I love that. Well, I appreciate both of you being here. And again, all of you, thank you for the privilege and opportunity to check back in and to be part of this journey that we're on together. And there's a deep sense of urgency. There's a deep sense of faith in our capacity to work together. And I think it's in that spirit, again, of humility and grace that we look to all of you for inspiration, that we look to partner with you. We have an Under Two coalition that we're part of with memorandums of understanding around the globe. We are so proud, just recent work we've been doing in that space in countries like China, and we'll be doing the same very shortly, quite literally, after this convening with governors from Brazil. And we appreciate your leadership. We're inspired by it. Success leaves clues. And I think in the spirit of the chair, Leanne said it best, inaction, that's where we pay the biggest cost. And we simply cannot afford inaction. And so thank you all for your activism. Thank you for your faith and devotion to this cause. And thank you for having us back together today.
Well, you did not disappoint, all three of them. Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Leon. Thank you, Wade. High-level takeaway, obviously, not treating nature as separate from all other systems. Governor, California's climate commitment not limited to political boundaries. California remaining a reliable global partner. Climate work being as much about the economy as it is about anything else. Pollution, an act of theft. I love that. It is so, it has to be ingrained in all of us. Leanne, it was really fantastic to hear. So 75% of greenhouse gas emissions support vulnerable communities. That is across the state agencies, and the governor has put our feet to the fire that we make that happen. And it's great to hear that. And that all of our systems are connected. And that we tell business and the economy is just as much. The governor put it best, big on the what and small on the how. Those are the critical parts of, I think, the great California leadership. Actually, that's not politically bound. The office is Occupy Governor, created by Ronald Reagan in 1970, as you mentioned, the most stringent environmental law enacted in the country at the time. And that's kind of the spirit of California leadership. Your conversation really will set us up to the next steps as California is actually leading the following subnational meetings and summits as part of this conference, initiated by the Vatican. And our primary focus right after this is going to be really working with local communities to lift up their what we're calling blueprints, so that we get to the implementation aspect of it, focus on implementation. We're not creating new plans, but to help them get there. And that's going to be our focus. And we look forward to sharing that with all the audience here and communities and counties around around California. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all so much for the great discussion and for taking the time. This session is now closed. So if all would join the next session from the lobby. Thank you.